welcome to your KIM 225 class for March 31st. I've got an announcement about your final exam. So it is essentially twice the length of your midterm exam. So it's 100 multiple choice questions and 10 short answer questions, and those short answer questions are worth 2 marks each. So your whole exam is out of 120. There's 30 marks from material from before the midterm, and then 90 marks for material after the midterm. Your due date, according to the university, for your midterm is, for your final exam is Wednesday, April 28th. And I'm making that due time right before midnight, so 11:59. I will be distributing the final exam at 12 a.m. on Tuesday, April 27th. So that gives you all day Tuesday and all day Wednesday to write this exam. So it's a 48-hour take-home exam, open book. So for today's class, I'm covering mainly fat metabolism. First thing I'm going to do is go over whole body fat metabolism after eating and during exercise. And then I'll also be covering the effect of low versus high glycemic feeding. And, I'll also scatter in some review questions into this lecture as well. So the first thing I wanted to do is go over this exercise that I posted, is placing these labels on the next 2 diagrams. So what I have here is labels on the left-hand side of the screen. And then on the right-hand side, I just have some notes to help you with those labels. So, try to do this exercise on your own. I think it'll help you to increase your learning for the fat metabolism. So it involves placing the labels in these boxes. So this is after a meal, and then the next one is during exercise. And what I'll be doing is I'm going to be putting those labels onto the diagrams for you here. So first one is after a meal. So from the small intestine, you'll have 2 things that can be taken up by adipose tissue to be stored as fat. So one thing that gets absorbed is, from carbohydrates, is your glucose. And the other thing that gets absorbed is your triglyceride. So those come from the fat and the carbohydrate in your food. Triglyceride is too big to actually go across the adipose tissue membrane. So you know that fats are going to be stored as triglyceride in your adipose tissue. So eventually we're going to get triglyceride up here. But to get this big molecule across the membrane, it first has to be broken down. And it's broken down by an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase. Okay, so that lipoprotein lipase breaks down triglyceride into glycerol and fatty acids. And then the glycerol and fatty acids, and specifically it's going to be 3 fatty acids, they can reform triglyceride to be stored in your adipose tissue. So the one thing that is missing here is the hormone that helps to get glucose into adipose tissue and then convert it to glycerol. So that hormone is insulin. So insulin is good at packing things away. In this case, it's packing away glucose into adipose tissue to help to form that triglyceride. Now the next diagram I have is what happens during exercise. So during exercise, you're going to kind of have the opposite effect. You're breaking down triglyceride that's stored in your adipose tissue. And the goal here during exercise is to eventually get some energy to your muscle, to supply energy for muscle contraction. So the triglyceride, again, is too big to get across this membrane. So it gets broken down, and it gets broken down into glycerol, and then you'd have 3 fatty acids. You can see the fatty acids can then go into the muscle, and eventually they enter the mitochondria and go through that beta oxidation pathway, then the Krebs cycle, and then the electron transport chain. The glycerol, on the other hand, can go to liver, and there it can be converted to glucose, and that glucose can then go to muscle and be used as an energy source. So if you want to draw some extra things in here, you can draw glucose over here. So that's glucose, and then the glucose can go into the blood and be taken up by the muscle and used for energy. Now, to break down the triglyceride, you need an enzyme that's called hormone-sensitive lipase, and that'll break it down into glycerol and fatty acids. So I'm just going to put HSL. That stands for hormone-sensitive lipase. So lipase indicates that it's going to break down the triglyceride, and hormone indicates that it's activated by specific hormones. And the main hormones that activate that enzyme during exercise are your growth hormone, your epinephrine, and norepinephrine. So those three hormones will stimulate the hormone-sensitive lipase to help you break down triglyceride in the adipose tissue. Fatty acids then go to the muscle. The glycerol does not go to the muscle, but instead goes to the liver, where it can be converted to glucose. From the small intestine, just like after a meal, you get your triglycerides coming in. The triglycerides can then be broken down to fatty acids and also glycerol. So again, at the muscle membrane, you have hormone-sensitive lipase, just like you do at the adipose tissue membrane. And that hormone-sensitive lipase, or HSL, will help to break down that triglyceride so that fatty acids can get into the muscle and eventually be used for energy. So that's pretty much a summary of fat metabolism after a meal on this slide, and then what happens during exercise.